Hi, Sue. Hi, Miss Tia.
Hello.
Can't hear you, Sue. Sue, do you want to try talking again and let us see if we can hear you? Oh, she says she's switching computers. Steve, you're on mute.
Hey guys, is that better?
I think we're ready to get started. I know we have a lot of people on YouTube ready to engage in a Q&A with us about our transition to our hybrid plan. I just want to say a few brief things before we get started. We have gotten a lot of questions from many of you, so we'll go through a number of questions that we've gotten. We'll each take turns kind of answering questions, and then we'll open it up for a Q&A for whoever's on YouTube. And all you need to do is type your question in the chat and we'll do our best to answer it. So I'm Steve Barrett. I'm Superintendent of Schools, and I appreciate you joining us here tonight. We have Sue Wigging, who is our Executive Director of Special Education. We have Tia Holloman, who's our curriculum director, and we have Jill Elliott with us tonight, who's our assistant superintendent. And behind the scenes with us on Zoom is our technology director, Matt Blackwell. So we'll get started. I just want to start by saying we are grateful for the patience and sacrifice and commitment of our parents, our teachers. All of you have shown a great deal of patience with our plans to do distance learning, but also transition into hybrid. We know each decision that we make impacts our students, our families, and staff all a little bit differently. We understand that some families feel it's critical we return to school immediately. Some even want us to return immediately 5 days a week with all students, while others believe our plan to return in October is too soon. They think we should wait and get the lay of the land of where the virus is going to go. And some have suggested we transition to hybrid at the semester. We understand the urgency and at times the frustration that goes along with so much uncertainty. We feel it in our roles, and we know you feel it very deeply as parents and community members. We're committed to transitioning to students into in-person learning smoothly and safely. And we want all GJPS teachers, students, to have a GJPS teacher. So we want all of our students to experience, you know, classroom teaching from one of our teachers. One of the reasons we created the plan we did is we thought going to a third-party provider was going to be sort of a lost year for students. It was going to be more like a rote learning experience. We know the experience we've had in the past with things like blizzard bags and rote learning and memorization and answering multiple choice questions. And we think deep learning, high quality learning, is about thinking and dialogue and reading and writing. And our teachers have done an amazing job to start out the year with distance learning. And we're very proud of their hard work. They've learned a lot from the springtime. They're leveraging what they've learned, and they're working extremely hard. They're using different platforms that they just learned about recently, and the engagement is much stronger. And we're hearing from many of you that we're simulating a school day. And we believe that our transition to in-person learning needs to leverage this distance learning process that our teachers and students are engaged in, because we think we're going to maybe have to switch back and forth. We think that distance learning will be an anchor. And I think some people in our letter from Friday wondered what that meant. Is that somehow a stance that we're only going to do distance this year? No, we think it's something that we need to leverage, whether we're in hybrid or whether we're fully in distance. And the reason we think that's important is if teachers have to go into quarantine or whole classrooms have to be closed down and students have to go into quarantine, we want to be able to leverage distance learning in a strong way. And that's what we mean by the anchor. We think it's critical to provide our students with continuity within the curriculum and to limit disruptions when we can. But we also realize that COVID-19 is likely to be with us throughout the school year. So it's likely to interfere with the educational experience. And that breaks our hearts. We really want this to be a strong, robust, rich year of learning, even with all the constraints that we have afoot. I think the success we're experiencing with distance learning is a result of lots of experiential learning from the spring. And we think that students are really highly engaged right now. And we think that's a good thing. And we think we can leverage that and use that in our hybrid plan. We think it'll influence our future transition. And we want that transition to be a very deliberate, methodical, safe process. So with that, I'm gonna turn it over to Jill Elliott, who will bring up a series of questions that we know many of you want answers to. We'll go through the questions we've already heard about, and that will answer some of your questions, but we know you'll have more, and we'll be ready to answer those as well. So thank you, Jill.
Okay. So the first question of many that we've received is, why are we waiting until October 13th to make the hybrid transition?
Yeah, so there are many factors that went into our decision to start on October 13th. we believe that distance learning will be our anchor. We believe that, many districts are experiencing teachers having to go into quarantine. There's stuff on the news every single night. So we want to be flexible and nimble and be able to kind of leverage distance learning if we have, quarantine situations. And we think learning the distance process best, allowing our at-home days in hybrid. So we will have a gold and a blue group. The students are in the gold or in the classroom. We believe that the students that are in the blue hybrid could tap in and stream into the classroom so that they'll have a continuous amount of learning. And the at-home days won't be like blizzard bags. They won't be just worksheets and rote learning, that all week long the teachers can connect the two hybrid groups together. And we believe we can do that with distance as well. But we also have some training to do. We have some training to do in streaming that's really important. We have some training of elementary teachers. We are going to redeploy some of our staff to teach kindergarten, first and second grade at the elementary level, and we need to do some training in regard to that. But it's really, really important that we start this and we're ready, because we're positive we're going to have situations where we're going to have to switch back and forth and be in quarantine. Maybe not with whole buildings, maybe not the whole district, but certainly within classrooms. And we don't want learning to be disrupted for a 14-day or a 10-day period. And so leveraging what we're learning in distance learning, leveraging streaming, that our tech team is working really hard to put in place for our teachers. We're excited about it, but it's going to take us a little bit of time. And we know we have families on both sides of the issue. Some want us in tomorrow with all kids present. Others want us to take our time, and are fearful that if we go back too soon, what's going to happen is we're going to have virus spike in our buildings, and then we're going to have to switch back and forth. So what we're trying to do is just be methodical, deliberate, and really be ready for when we open in the hybrid model on October 13th.
Thank you. So you touched on this in your opening, Mr. Barrett, but I'm not sure if you want to expand or add anything to the question. What do you mean by by distance learning being the anchor for this school year?
Yeah, what I mean by distance learning being the anchor is it is going to be our go-to when we have to switch back and forth. If there's a quarantine situation, if somebody has to go on a 14-day quarantine, a teacher maybe who isn't sick, but maybe has been exposed to the virus, we want to be able to allow that teacher to teach in the classroom, maybe remotely. We would have an aide or a teacher in the classroom, perhaps watching the kids as that learning took place. We know other districts are experiencing this. We know we will experience this. And so what we mean is by the anchor is it's something that we can leverage when there's a situation when we need to use it. We're so proud of our teachers and what they're doing with distance learning, proud of our students too, because they're learning new things. And we think it'll be something that we can switch from either classroom by, when a classroom is affected, or maybe several classrooms, or maybe even a whole building, and hopefully not the whole district. So we want to be ready so that we don't have learning get stalled, or there'll be a break in it because people are in a quarantine type situation.
Why can't we continue with distance learning instead of changing to the hybrid model?
So we've also had people reach out to us and say, hey, distance learning is going really well. Why don't we continue it till we know more about where the virus is going, maybe until there's a vaccine. We also think it's really important to get back in the buildings for social emotional learning. We know how important it is to have students connect face-to-face in person with teachers and their fellow students, be in collaborative groups, doing things like Socratic dialogues. We think it's really important to get back in the building. We also think that it's really hard for teachers to do distance learning. We think it's going to to be a very difficult year for our staff, our administrators, our counselors, our teachers, our support staff. And we do want to get back into distance learning, but we want to have a plan for how to move back and forth in case illness appears, and so that we don't have to stop learning. So that's really what we mean by the anchor.
Why weren't distance learning students separated at the beginning of the year and given a separate teacher at that point?
So we thought a lot about that, and we looked at third-party platforms, and we just didn't see how they would equal what our GJPS teachers do on a daily basis. A lot of these programs have improved. You may have seen in the paper over the weekend that a number of districts have had some problems with third-party vendors. But we just think we can do better by our students. We want to have students have access to the full panoply of courses we have to offer, especially, you know, our electives at the middle and high school level. I mean, I think we have one of the most diverse curricula imaginable for a high school. And it just broke our hearts to think that, you know, if a student went into a third-party provider, there may not be honors classes, there may not be AP classes, there may not be some of our rich electives like World War II history or robotics, or, you know, a number of other classes. We could name 30 or 40 that most high schools don't have. And we wanted to make sure that each of our students had the ability to take those courses. It's really important that this isn't a lost year. You know, you get to do 11th grade or 10th grade one time. And I think it's really important that we look at this year in the wide span of 180 days. And what is it going to look like in quarter 2, in quarter 3, in quarter 4? What's it going to look like when flu season commingles with the COVID virus? I'm hoping we'll be able to be in school and, you know, maybe, you know, have quarantine from, you know, time and again, and hopefully people will be safe. But we're hoping to be able to manage that in a flexible, micro kind of way, and we don't have to close schools, the entire building. I read about a school in Northeast Ohio. They had to close the whole school. And that's unfortunate. And they have to be closed for 2 weeks. And it's because a number of staff members were infected with the virus. So what we want to do is build a flexible system that will allow us to keep learning going, even if there's a quarantine situation.
Why did the district decide to change the originally discussed 3-day, 2-day rotation schedule and instead pivot to a 1-2-2 schedule?
We're looking at hybrid and distance learning as a way to kind of, you know, let's say there's an Algebra 2 class at the high school. We're looking at the gold group and the blue group and the distance learning group as one. If you think of a Venn diagram, you know, you'd have gold on one side, you'd have blue on the other, and in the middle would be distance. And we want students to be able to keep the teachers they have now. We want them to be able to be successful in the classes they have now. And on that Monday, where we called it condensed learning, we want the whole class, both A and B, to be together for half a day for distance learning. And we want, you know, that day to be any number of things, but it could be for presentations, it could be collaborative learning, it could be project-based learning, it could be teachers meeting with each of their classes, depending on what level. But we want to look at that as one cohesive unit. And we also want to give our teachers some time on Mondays to prepare. They're creating videos and they're doing all kinds of hard work, and they're going to need time to prepare so that we can be nimble and we can switch back and forth as we need to, depending on what happens with the virus within our community and in our schools. And so the 3-2, one of the things we were really worried about is on the days when students were home, that the learning was going to be rote. It was going to be more like a blizzard bag. And what we want to do is leverage streaming so that kids can be connected throughout the week. and not just on the 3 days that they're in school 1 week, which would have been every other Monday, and the 2 days the next week. What that represented was about 50% of classroom time, 60 1 week, 40 the next. You average those, you get 50. And what we're trying to do is have more classroom contact time than that, because we don't want kids going home doing packets and worksheets. We want them exposed to experiential learning with Gahanna teachers. We don't want them on a third-party provider. And so that's why we made that change.
Thank you. If I choose distance learning for my student, can he or she come into school for just certain classes or activities?
So we've had this question from parents, especially parents whose children are interested in the performing arts, so band and choir and classes like that. And you know, those, so band, for instance, is what we call a co-curricular. And so orchestra is the same way. So you get your grade based on, you know, concerts and then in time learning in the classroom. And so what some wanted to do is do distance learning, but then come in and do band class. We're not going to be able to do that because we want to maintain safety and we don't want students coming and going for one class. But you can do distance learning in those type of classes and come in for practices in the evenings and after school. So whenever there's you know, a rehearsal, you can come in and be a part of that.
Okay, so I'll take the next question, a few questions. This one says, will my student get to keep their classroom teacher, and how is this different at the various levels? So, you know, we really understand the impact and, you know, how a special bond is created with a teacher. And as Mr. Barrett shared, you know, we were making decisions at the beginning not to separate kids right out of the gates. We, you know, we wanted to stay true to keeping Gahanna teachers with our Gahanna kids. And so that's, you know, the decision we made. And we know that it is super difficult for those types of transitions to happen. And it's something that is weighing on our hearts and minds and that we've had lots of discussions about also. You know, with the model moving forward at the K-5 level, some students, you know, will maintain their current teacher. However, due to the staffing adjustments that we need to make for the continued distance learning side of that model, some students, you know, may be assigned to a new Gahanna Jefferson teacher. We know this is really unfortunate, and we're going to work really hard to keep as many kids with their current teacher as possible at the K-5 level, and really to cause the least disruption possible. But we also are already starting the planning efforts on how to make those transitions smooth for kids. At the preschool level and the middle school and high school levels, due to the model with the streaming, those students will be able to maintain their current teachers and course schedules. So, you know, we know that it will be really tough. And like I said, it's something that, you know, we are thinking a lot about right now on how to make those transitions as smooth as possible. But there will be some adjustments for some students. The next question, will there be an in-person orientation for new kindergarten, 6th grade, and 9th grade students who will be joining a new building for the first time? So the answer to that is yes. We do intend to bring our kindergarten students, our 6th grade students, and our 9th grade students who are, you know, transitioning into a new building for the very first time in for some orientation time where it's just them in the building. We're looking at that being the last couple days of the first quarter before we kind of start that full transition into the hybrid plan. We're still finalizing details on that, but we do have that worked in, and more details will be shared with families in the coming days. When will families get information about which group they have been assigned to for the hybrid learning model? So this is something we really want to work to get to families as quickly as possible. We know that there are implications on your childcare situations and your family schedules. So we're planning to share those hybrid groups toward the end of next week. We need to get the survey data completed and work our algorithms and grouping so that we can make sure that families and household students are on the same schedules. And then we will be getting that information out, like I said, toward the end of next week is our plan, so that you can begin working on those adjustments. So this next question, I know, has been has come up several times. Originally, we had communicated with families and had been asking families to make that year-long commitment. And so this question, once I make a learning model choice for my child, will I be able to make a change later in the school year? So we really want to work with families on an individual basis that maybe feel like the learning model they selected is not working out best for their student, so that we can consider, what might be appropriate to make the learning model more successful, or have discussions about if a change might be appropriate and could be accommodated. There are definitely a lot of things that go into that, class sizes and numbers and social distancing and all those pieces, safe capacity, but we absolutely would like to work with families on this. I also want to add that hopefully we'll get to the point where we can bring all students back full-time in the traditional manner. And at that point, we would definitely allow our distance learning students to reintegrate and to join back into the traditional school model. So, we'll continue working with families and, kind of analyzing as we go. So this next question connects to the 1-2-2 schedule that Mr. Barrett talked a little bit about. We've previously shared that we'll have condensed Mondays. And so I know there's a lot of question about what those condensed Mondays will look like. So we had some meetings last week. We talked more today, and we're finalizing some of those details, but it will be include shortened class periods, and it will be a combination of some teacher directed, some synchronous, some asynchronous work and learning going on those days. And so we may also need to use time later in the day to ensure that we can get, some specially designed instruction service in, as well as, connect with kids in different ways, possibly for intervention enrichment. But the schedule will be condensed and shortened periods, and more details specific to each level will be shared in the coming weeks. So we're going to transition to our Director of Curriculum, Tia Holloman. She's going to take some of the next questions. So Tia, the first one is, what will at-home learning days look like in the hybrid model?
Yeah, so there will be some variation between the levels. For our pre-K2 students, they will complete asynchronous or independent learning activities that are provided by their classroom teacher. Some of those activities might include independent reading, online tech tools like Dreambox and Lexia, math games and practice and things of that nature that they're able to complete on their own. And then the teachers would follow up with them when they're back in the buildings the next day. For our students in grades 3 through 12, they will participate in lessons and learning activities with the classroom through Google Meet. So they will log in and be able to join in some of those whole class and small group types of activities, as well as have a blend of some independent work as well.
Thank you. Will students at home days in hybrid or distance learning require them to be on the computer all day long?
The answer to that is no. We are going to continue to maintain the balance between online and offline tasks for students. So we do not expect students to be logged in all day. They will join into the class for whole class lessons. And then when they're assigned or released for independent work or asynchronous work, they would log off of the Google Meet. But throughout the day or throughout the period, they may be asked to rejoin either for another whole class, mid teaching point, or a whole group or a small group, or it may even be a time where the teacher wants to meet one-on-one with them for some conferring or for some just some additional support there. So but the teacher would be able to assign and let the kids know when they would be expected to log back on. But as I had mentioned before, we definitely are going to maintain the balance between students' screen time on and off the computer.
Mm-hmm. How will the teachers make sure they're giving equal attention to the distance students versus the in-room students?
Yeah. So we do realize that it may be challenging, and we recognize that our students that are in distance learning may experience a different level of attention than what they're currently getting right now with everybody being on distance. But we know that our teachers are doing a wonderful job in connecting and engaging with students, and they will continue to do their best to make sure that they engage the students that are at home and in distance learning. We're looking at different teaching strategies and groupings throughout the day and throughout the week to make sure that they have that connection both with the teacher and with the classroom.
What will performance courses like band, choir, and theater look like?
Yeah. And so this is another one. I know Mr. Baird kind of referenced it earlier on, in that we recognize that there's going to be some adjustments and things are going to be different, but we're going to run these courses, as close to normal as possible. There will be masks, there will be social distancing, there will be hand sanitizing, but we're going to do our best to run them as close to normal as possible. And we are still waiting for finalized guidance in terms of concerts and performances, but still that in-class learning experience, we want students to be able to continue with that.
Will students be seeing a teacher every day in the distance learning model?
Yeah. So on most days, the answer is yes. The students will still see their teacher in some forms, whether it's a live connection or if it's a recorded video of their teacher. In many cases, they'll probably connect with the teacher multiple times throughout the day. There may be an instance where a student is working on independent work, or they're doing a project or a lesson that's a continuation of the previous day, and it doesn't necessarily require a live engagement with the teacher, but they will have frequent contact with that teacher throughout their time.
Thank you. So I'm going to turn things to Sue Wieging's direction. And this first question is pretty broad, but what will special education services look like in both models?
So if a student is in our distance learning model, they'll continue to get their accommodations and their services similar to how they're being provided right now. Many of those services are being provided through live Google Meets or utilizing our telehealth platform if they're being provided services with our related service staff. And that would apply to all of our students, preschool through post-secondary. For families who opt to have the students attend our hybrid learning model, we'll have students also assigned to the blue or gold hybrid groups. And most students with disabilities will come in on their assigned days, and they'll be provided their specially designed instruction while they're in the school building. Some students might also need additional services during their own at-home learning days, and that will be determined based on individual student needs. The students who are in our specialized programs may have a unique schedule based on a different time or frequency than their same grade peers due to their unique strengths or their needs. There are some students in our program who are not yet able to come following the 1-2-2 schedule in the same way as their peers, or they may need additional frequency beyond the 1-2-2 model due to their unique circumstances. We've already been communicating, and many teams have already been talking to families about unique situations and possibly altered schedules. And we'll continue to monitor students' response to both the hybrid and the distance learning and consider adjusting or making differences to our methods, our time or frequency of services when a student needs such a change. Students who are being provided services under a 504 plan will also continue to be provided their accommodations and their services, regardless of which model they choose. One question I did just want to throw out there that I've been asked many times is if we intend as a district to amend the current IEPs or the 504 plans due to our distance learning or hybrid model, and we are not. At this point, we're continuing to follow the recommendations from the Ohio Department of Education and the Office for Exceptional Children, and we hope to continue to write IEPs and 504s based on the needs of the individual students and their circumstances, and not the circumstances of COVID-19. So at this point, we're not going to be amending any IEPs or 504s, and we're continuing to provide services under the model that the family chooses for their student.
Thank you. So this next one is definitely a common question that we get, and just what will happen if a student or staff member has a positive COVID-19 test?
So we've been working really closely with the Franklin County Public Health Department, and we do have a plan in place, which includes careful documentation and reporting each positive case of COVID-19 to them in order for them to review our documentation and information, and they'll follow up as needed. All information shared with them will be confidential. They have committed to guide us through the process of determining if and when a class or a group of students or even a building might need to be notified or quarantined. There are protocols we have in place, but there are unique circumstances for every student or family who might have a positive diagnosis. And we're committed to work collaboratively with the health department on making sure we follow their recommendations. We do have safety guidelines in place, including what happens when a student develops symptoms during the school day. And we have communication systems in place to make sure that all parents are made aware of what's happening in their student school building or in their class when necessary. Parents will also be getting an email that provides with them detailed information about our safety practices and what they need to do as a family prior to a student getting on a school bus or coming into a school building to ensure the safety for their student and the other students and staff members. That will be emailed out to parents and also available on our website.
Thank you, Sue. So that concludes the questions that we wanted to start with that are the most common questions we've been receiving. At this time, we're going to transition to the chat that's occurring on YouTube Live right now. And I'm going to read questions as they come in. And the four of us will take turns, kind of answering the questions accordingly. I did want to note that because we started the presentation trying to give some background information and answering those common questions, if there's a question that comes up that I feel like we maybe already answered, I'll acknowledge it. But if there's something that you need us to expand upon, we would ask that you would just, enter, a more specific question. And we have, about an hour to try and get through as many of these questions as we possibly can. So we're going to work on being succinct and to the point and try to get through as many as we possibly can. So the first one, Mr. Barrett, I'm going to send your way. Can we please consider pinpointing COVID-19 cases just to the zip codes of our students and not all of Franklin County? You're on mute.
We're under the jurisdiction of Franklin County Public Health, and we realize that this is very confusing. Where there's orders from the Ohio Department of Health, there's recommendations from Franklin County Public Health, and that is who we're really required to follow. And when we look at the numbers in our area, we have had some local data, and they're higher than other communities. But I understand that people think if we can just segment our community, then maybe we could get back to school maybe 5 days a week. But at the end of the day, we have to follow recommendations of public health. Our liability insurance is tied to it, but also the safety of our kids and our families, many, and including our teachers. So at the end of the day, I know that's not the answer that many will agree with, but Franklin County Public Health, when they told us to go on distance learning, when they made that recommendation, there were a lot of factors that went into our need to follow that. I think that it's what's really frustrating is that when we were closed in, I think it was April, I want to say April 19th, the highest number we had during the school closure was 1,350. We've had many days higher than that in July. We've had days recently higher than that. And this alert system can be very, very confusing. Our numbers per 100,000 just went up significantly. We're still in orange, but they went from in the low 90s to 108. And I think today they were in the 150s. And so don't quote me on that, but it's around that number. So it is interesting to see how the recommendations have changed, even though there seems to be more cases. And I think it's another thing that you know, you may not see, you know, because in your circle you might have folks that feel a certain way, but we have a lot of people who have underlying conditions, whether they're teachers or community members. We have a lot of grandparents raising their children, and they're afraid to send their kids back to school. So what we want to do is go back in a very measured, methodical way and be ready to be nimble to shift and keep instruction going, even if there is a quarantine situation.
Thank you. So the next question, hi there, thanks for doing this. My son is going to Eastland for his junior year full time. We're needing to know how busing will work since his classes start in person on Monday. Can you assist? So this happens to be one of those questions I had a chance to see early, and I was able to reach out to our transportation supervisor. So I do have some information to share, but it's a good opportunity for me to tell you that if there are questions that we maybe don't have the specific answer to, you know, we'll work on getting those answers and including those in some future communication. With regard to the transportation, though, there are two pickup locations, Middle School West, which would be around no later than 7:05 is what is said, and pickup at Gahanna Lincoln High School no later than 7:15. The bus going to Eastland is going to be bus 106. And then I'll also just share, I know you referenced Eastland, but the bus going to Fairfield is 109. And then those will return to Gahanna Lincoln High School from Eastland at 2:50. So that specific information, if anyone else had transportation questions, you could reach out to our transportation supervisor, Jason Key, and they will work hard to get you that information. The next question, if a teacher or student travels to a hotspot like Florida during this time, will they be required to quarantine upon returning to school? Sue, do you want to take this one?
Sure. So there are recommendations for travel, both internationally and nationally. And if you travel to a rate that includes 15% or higher of COVID-19 cases, it is advised that you do self-quarantine for 14 days when you return to your home prior to coming to school. That's an advisement and not a requirement, but we would like to work with you collaboratively to make that decision and contact Franklin County Public Health to get some feedback.
Thank you. The next question, hoping to hear why changing the schedule, teachers, and classmates of elementary students is okay. What was the point of the last 9 weeks then for our students to bond and form routines?
Yeah, that's the biggest flaw of our plan, and it breaks our heart that we have to do that. We are in a position where we're going to have to redeploy staff to teach kindergarten, first and second grade for distance learning students. Earlier in July, when we did a survey in terms of how many folks chose distance learning, there were something like 700 distance learning students or parents requesting distance learning for elementary school. And one of the factors is we just didn't have enough teachers to deploy to teach all of those students, JGPS teachers. So what we would have had to do is go with a third-party provider. So in 3 through 12, we're going to be able to create a hybrid plan that allows for streaming. That's very difficult in K-1-2. And so we're going to redeploy staff and have them teach distance learning students. And so some students may have a change of teacher either in the hybrid or the distance learning. It won't be all, but some, and we don't feel good about that. We're very sad about it, but it's something that we're kind of going to have to do at this point.
Mr. Barrett, I will add to that piece just so families know that, you know, in the event that we would be required to shift back to all distance learning, at another time in the year, we would not do another shift at that point. Students would stay with the teacher that they had been reassigned to, if that were to happen. So the next question I believe was answered regarding why the shift from the 3-day, 2-day to the 1-2-2. A follow-up from the same community member is that per the original plan issued in July, we were to be in school 5 days a week at a level orange. What is the current criteria to return to 5 days a week, and who makes that decision? Want to take that, Mr. Barrett?
Yeah, so I'm not sure if that means 5 days a week, all in person. So we did have a 3-day, 2-day, so it wasn't 5 days in 1 week. Recommendations from Franklin County Public Health would allow us to consider a 5-day return, so Monday through Friday with all students. I don't know if that's in the offing anytime soon. They're making a lot of progress with vaccines, but I don't, it doesn't change who makes the recommendations. We have to follow public health officials and what they recommend so that we can ensure all of our teachers and families and students are safe.
Tia, I'm going to come to you for this next one. If we choose the distance learning option beginning the 13th of October, will my child be able to come to Chinese class after school on Wednesdays in person?
Yeah, so actually, I will have communication out about the Chinese program and how we will run classes, but we have been working to make it possible that all of the students who are beginning Chinese on the 21st will be able to continue that. So more information will be coming actually tomorrow.
So this next question, I'll try to tackle it first. How much virtual instruction will the distance students get? What is the teacher independent time ratio? And if the district goes back to full distance, will they go back to their first teacher? So I addressed that last question. Regarding the teacher to independent time ratio and just the virtual instruction. So those students would be engaged in virtual instruction daily. We utilize our educator lingo is catch and release model is what we talk a lot about. And so it's starting with students maybe for a lesson or a video lesson, and then they might be released to go do some independent work. Ms. Holloman addressed this in one of her earlier questions. We don't have a specific ratio outlined. It will be dependent on teacher and course and learning objectives for the day and the week. And so it could vary from day to day. It could vary from week to week. Certainly keeping in mind that balance of on computer time and off computer time, as Ms. Holloman mentioned. But we definitely want to make sure that our virtual students are engaged with their teachers during the lessons, as well as at various times as appropriate for small group connections and individual support. Does anybody want to add anything to that?
No, you touched on the small group. Sometimes the live connection with the teacher might look different. So there may be days where it is more time spent on a whole class lesson because they're maybe starting a new lesson or starting with new learning. And then the next day there might be more opportunities for independent practice and small group. But in those times, teachers will also be connecting with students in different ways. So like Mrs. Elliott had mentioned, that it might be a small group to process what they have learned the previous day. It might be some independent time. It might be some individual one-on-one with the teacher. So it'll look differently throughout, but there still will be many opportunities for connection with the teacher.
I would just add to that and just sort of reinforce what Tia and Jill said, that I think distance learning students in this model need to be sort of self-regulated and self-starters and be able to kind of work maybe more independently. When you're checking in face-to-face, day-to-day with a teacher, I think it helps you be on track a little better. And so I think that's an important thing to consider as you're making your decision for whether it's distance or hybrid. I think the in-person learning will really enhance the distance part of that hybrid model. So I think that's, I don't want to suggest that if you have an underlying condition or someone in your family does, you shouldn't try distance. But I think if it's going to require a little more independence and you know, creating a structure, having students being self-motivated, self-regulated, and those kinds of things are going to be important, I think.
Okay, so the next question, most schools have one related arts teacher each, I believe referencing at the elementary level. How will distance students participate in those?
So we are looking at different options to ensure that our students that are in distance learning are still getting access to our related arts, because that is an important component of their educational experience. We were looking at creative scheduling and just different opportunities that would provide themselves as an opportunity to be connected with different teachers. So we are still working through those details, and we'll have more information to share soon.
Next question, what about lab classes if we choose distance learning option? Mr. Baird, do you want to take that one? I know you addressed it a little in the beginning.
Yeah, so I think those classes will be a little bit harder. It'll be harder to do a Fab Lab class or a science class. I mean, you can peer in and watch an experiment, and but it's not the same as being in person. So the model we're designing is not perfect for that kind of work. I think, you know, when you see some of the online third-party provider platforms, what they'll do, and you know, for an experiment, is they'll show a video of sorts, and you can get a little something, but it's not the same as being there. So I think we're just being honest when we say I think it'll be harder to glean that experience if you're not live and in person. But you can certainly watch it and certainly go over what the teacher says about the experiments, the hypothesis, and the scientific method, and all of that can be learned. But the actual experience of creating the experiment, hands-on learning, will be more difficult in distance.
I would also add that, you know, the model that we are working with regard to the live streaming, you know, in just a separate distance learning model, maybe it's similar to what we're currently in, or if a third-party vendor were used, you know, it's really hard to have those experiential learning opportunities. But in the live streaming model, you know, it's not the same as being there in person, but being able to watch peers, you know, complete a lab experience, or, you know, work with the teacher through modeling and be able to reflect and learn from that experience is, you know, something that we hope to be able to capitalize on.
Mm-hmm. And I would also add that, again, it won't serve as a replacement, but there are some programs and platforms that we have that offer simulations that students could do to still get some of the experience on their own. That's about it.
Mr. Barrett, this next one's I'm going to send your way. Why can't our kids start back in person on September 21st, and we can add live streaming from classrooms when it is ready?
Because I think that would be difficult for us to pull off, to have our elementary teachers that we're going to redeploy to teach grade levels they haven't taught before. And I think it would also be tough to have teachers be ready for the live streaming. We have a lot of training to do between now and then. And again, what we're looking at is the expanse of the entire year. What we're looking at after the first quarter is 3 more quarters. And we think we're going to be poised and positioned to be nimble to switch from one to the other, maybe even classroom by classroom if there's a quarantine situation, because we're investing this time and leveraging technology in the way that we plan to leverage it. It is important to us that we look at 180 days. And by getting in on September 21st, I just don't think we'll be ready. And I think there'll be a lot of frustration, and people may give up on the technology and say it doesn't work. It's really something that we have to do in a deliberate, methodical, very kind of measured way.
Okay, this next one, Sue, I'm going to send your way. Why does it feel like kids with IEPs, 504s, and disabilities are put to the back burner in all these choices?
So I guess I would want more information about what that means. I would be happy to talk through that with each individual family. And we have coordinators of special education that will also be able to talk about unique circumstances. That would certainly not be our intention. And it's not how we want any family or student to feel. All intervention specialists have been given guidance, and I know they're working diligently to communicate, collaborate, and consult with families about their students' needs, how to meet their needs. And I know that our teachers are providing the accommodations necessary for our students to be successful. And when there's obstacles, we want to work with families and try to figure that out and make sure that we're meeting the individual needs of the students under this really unique model that we're implementing right now. That we're trying to figure out how to do the best that we can for the individual students, and that does look different for everybody.
Thank you. Ms. Holloman, will students be able to participate when live streaming or just watch?
They absolutely will be able to participate because they would be streaming in through Google Meet in the same way that they are doing now with everybody on distance. The tech department has been working diligently to get classrooms outfitted so that the sound system and the computer systems are all working. We've done a couple of tests and we've had some people pretending to be students at home logged into the Meet, and then it piped into the classroom to be able to test sound and connectivity and all of those things. So they absolutely will be able to participate in those instances, not always at the same level as Mr. Baird had mentioned previously with some of our more hands-on activities, but definitely in terms of discussion, in terms of the lessons, being able to you know, chat amongst themselves with those who are on the Meet and then also those who are in the classroom.
So I'll tackle the next one. Why were kids started with block schedules only to be upheaved again? Block classes allows transition and cleaning time at schools and keeps a reasonable expectation kids know for distance learning. So I will say that the block schedule component is something that we can continue to discuss. There are a lot of factors that come into play with working that schedule once our students are back in the buildings. And one major factor is the lunch piece. You know, the high school will be operating with full, you know, in-building lunches and an additional lunch period added so that we can accommodate all of our students. And so the block scheduling, it impacts staffing, it impacts, you know, schedules for kids, it impacts where we have shared staff among buildings. And so there's a lot of factors that go into it, but I can say even up until a couple hours ago, you know, our administrative team continues to really work really hard to try and figure out if it's something that we can make work. So it's you know, it's not completely off the table. We're still really working to try and figure that out.
And Jill, I just want to mention, doing lunch at the high school, generally we don't have enough room for lunch, but we'll only have about half the students in the building at one time. Open lunch that juniors and seniors traditionally do will not be something we'll be able to permit this year. But we'll still have some trouble making sure there's social distancing in the lunch periods because our cafeteria space isn't adequate for the number of students we have. But Jessica Williams, our principal, is working hard to make sure that that's all worked out. There will be social distancing in all of our eating spaces.
And I will add that our middle school principals are working really hard on that as well. Next question, Sue, I'm going to send your way. What will be the protocol for notifying parents of exposure? What will be the protocol for quarantine for students and teachers when there is a confirmed case? I know you touched on some of this at the beginning.
So the public health department is going to guide us through each of those situations based on the circumstances that come our way. There's a protocol for all of them. If there's a lot of things that depend, honestly, which is hard because it's a flow chart that we follow, that if a certain circumstance is in the situation, then we follow the guidance for quarantine or notification. In a very simple way, if there's a positive case within the building, the whole building will be notified. If there is close contact with someone who was identified as positive, those students will be, and parents will be notified so that they realize they were in close proximity of a student who was identified positive. And there are recommendations that we have for them, including monitoring their symptoms, practicing social distancing, and there may be a circumstance where they need to quarantine, depending on the length of exposure and how long the student was in the environment prior to being identified. We will take attendance, we'll be monitoring seating charts, we'll be monitoring small group assignments, and making sure that we contact the right people at the right time. We also will be monitoring students' symptoms, and if we suspect, in collaboration with the parent, that they are demonstrating COVID-19 symptoms, they will be sent home and they will be asked to contact their medical professional for guidance. We'll be working with them after they get home to get feedback about what their doctor or medical professional has provided to them as recommendations, whether it's testing, monitoring symptoms, or staying home to see what happens with those symptoms will be dependent upon if they're returning to school immediately or waiting until they're ready.
And I would add that we do intend to send, a parent communication in the coming weeks that kind of outlines those symptoms to be looking for and what those expectations would be regarding when to keep your student home, or when you could expect that we might send your student home if they're exhibiting, a variety of symptoms.
Where this will get tricky is the traditional flu season. As it commingles with COVID-19, a lot of the symptoms are very similar. And so we will have to, kind of look at each one very, very closely. Some epidemiologists expect the winter months when people go inside that the COVID-19 could spread. Some think that it could be bad because it could be a rough flu season. Some good news in the Southern Hemisphere, though, is flu rates are close to zero because people are social distancing and they're wearing masks. So the Southern Hemisphere right now, it's winter. And so that's good news. So hopefully we won't have a bad flu season because it's tough enough just to deal with COVID-19. So that's what we're hoping.
I will just add, Jill, quickly, I noticed some questions about specific information being released related to our actions when a student is identified as positive or with symptoms. And we do have those specific if-thens identified, and we will be sharing those with you in writing, and they'll be also on our website.
Thank you. Mr. Barrett, what systems are in place to make sure adults and students do not enter a meet and cause a disruption while teacher is teaching in front of the room and not able to monitor the chat or people in real time?
Yeah, so that we did have some difficulty at the high school. What we think happened is a YouTuber crashed a couple Google Meets, and we think some of our students may have given him a code. And so Matt Blackwell, our tech director, has put some things in place to prevent that. It is going to be difficult to monitor students online and students in person. We know that we're putting things in place. There will be rules and guidelines for students that are on distance learning or streaming from hybrid. We're going to have to be very strict with behavior because we can't have students misbehaving and creating disruption and creating a situation where learning is compromised for everyone.
Thank you. The next couple questions are related to students getting sick and having COVID and the quarantining. So I feel like we've addressed that. Mr. Barrett, coming back to you, will distance learning kids be allowed to participate in clubs and things like jazz band, and how will it work?
Yeah, so let's take jazz band. Yes, if rehearsals take place after school, they can certainly participate in jazz band, but they wouldn't be able to take the class live during the day if they were on distance learning. They would have to stream in to take that class. Other clubs, we have many different clubs. You would have to, a number of those we're going to go virtual with. because we won't have, like our God Talk Club, I mean, has many, many students. I can't see us having a space where all students could gather at once and be a part of that club. So that club is likely to go virtual. So we'll make it a case by case basis, but a lot of the clubs could be in a virtual setting. Things like jazz band, theater, students, we want students to be able to participate in a full array of extracurriculars they have, that we have. And if they're on distance learning, we want them to be able to come and do that, but they won't be able to participate during the school day if in, say, the performance studio class, if they're on distance learning, because that takes place during the school day, but rehearsals after, certainly.
And I'll say also that the health department has given us strong advice about the commingling of kids in different groups and such, so that, plays into that piece as well. Can we pick which days our child will be at home and at school for the 1-2-2 plan? Such as, can we pick to have our child at school on Tuesdays and Thursdays and home on Wednesdays and Fridays? So this is a really, really tough situation because as you can imagine, it would be really, really difficult to be able to accommodate individual requests and still meet social distancing and capacity requirements that we have. And so we do not have the option for families to, choose. We have received some specific requests that we, are willing to note, but we can't make any guarantees on those pieces because it will come down to numbers and groupings and households. What are the options to change from one selection to another if we find the option we selected does not fit our child? Are we allowed to reevaluate before the second semester? And there's a question right after that asking the same type of thing. And so, again, we want to work with families. We certainly, want to support if the model is not working and have discussions about what we might go to do to make it work. But ultimately, we certainly will work through things with the family and, consider changes if that's what's needed. What technology is in place that will allow the students at home to effectively see and hear the teacher at the front of the room, especially since the teacher will be wearing a mask? Ms. Holloman, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, so as I had mentioned earlier, we've been testing with the tech department the different equipment that would be used. And what we found is that, well, like as I mentioned before, we're still going to be using Google Meet as the streaming platform, if you will. And we've got webcams and connected to the desktops in the classroom. And we found that the sound, the mic on the webcam is pretty strong, and it picks up not only the teacher talking, but also the other students that would be in the classroom, all wearing masks. As I had mentioned before, we've had an opportunity to kind of test it out, and we continue to do tests with different types of webcams, different types of devices. And each time we have people logged into Google Meet in a different space to simulate the students at home to make sure that they can hear us and hear the people in the space with masks on, and also moving around the classroom in different places. So moving away from the webcam. We've been in a classroom where the webcam is up at the front of the classroom and there's a person in the back corner of the classroom, so kind of the farthest point from the webcam, and we have them just talk in a regular voice, and they're able to be heard by the students or the simulated students on the other end of the Google Meet.
And I'll also add, we've run our simulations with the air conditioner going, those air conditioning devices, just to make sure that we are able to, that students will be able to hear. We do recognize though that some times there may be a teacher that is maybe a little more softer spoken, and so we will also have some voice amplification devices available to help with that if that's an instance that we need to put some accommodations in place for.
And as we work on this technology, I mean, we're trying something that's lofty, that's a little bit different than what others are trying. And so getting this technology right is a big investment in time, not necessarily money. I want to say that, these third-party providers that we, could have gone to at the beginning, separating out distance learning kids, putting them in a situation where they were doing, much of what they'd be doing is rote learning. those are very, very expensive. It would have cost us probably upwards of $1 million to get the courses going in that kind of an arena. The investment we're making in webcams and mobile keyboards is very small in comparison, and the technology works. And so it's really important that we take our time and get the technology right, so that if we look at the whole span of the school year, so 180 days, we're going to be poised and positioned to shift when we need to shift, whether it's from hybrid to all distance, but it's probably more likely a classroom here or there, a teacher going on quarantine, maybe a classroom having to go on quarantine so that we don't have to close the whole building, or maybe if we do, teachers could teach remotely. That's really important to us, because we don't want to create a situation where there's 10, 14-day hiatuses back to back to back, and it disrupts learning for the entire year. That gives us a lot of heartburn, and we want to make sure that we can preserve as much engagement and as much learning time as we possibly can to make this a purposeful and fruitful year, so that, you know, in 21, 22, there aren't huge learning gaps. We're really, really concerned about that.
The next question is related to the AB schedule, their block schedule. So I think I touched on the fact that we're still really looking into that and trying to see how we could work that out. T, I'm going to come your way with this one. Specifically, what will be the differences between the current distance learning and the distance learning for families who opt out of hybrid? The current model is working well.
Yeah. So the main thing is the 5-day-a-week, well, and actually it's the block scheduling that happens in the distance learning currently with the 5 days. For our grades 3 through 12, the students will still be able to live stream in the same ways that they've been doing with their teachers now. They'll still be able to engage in some of the synchronous and asynchronous activities that the teacher is going to be providing. Some of the differences is, you know, we have mentioned before, when we're in the classroom spaces, there are certain hands-on activities that we're able to do because the resources, the supplies are there. The environment is set up in a way to allow for that exploration or that learning activity that may not be the case at home. I know that teachers, though, have become very creative in the way that they try to reinvent some of those experiences for students to do at home. We'll still be able to provide some of the manipulatives and supplies for students to have when they're at home. I think the biggest piece, though, is going to be the students. Some of our students are going in the classroom, are going to be in the building at least twice a week. And the students that are choosing or staying 100% distance won't come in the buildings, but many of the experiences will be similar and they'll be able to still engage in that learning, but there will be some differences when it comes to those hands-on experiences and things of that nature. And right now, I know, again, the way the hands-on looks when everybody is distance is different than what it will look when we have the ability to be in the classroom with different resources.
And I do want to provide just some clarification, because we do have some very distinct nuances between the models at the different levels. It's 6-12 distance learning kids that will be live streaming into the classroom, but 3-5 distance learning kids would have a separate teacher and wouldn't be live streaming in. It's just the hybrid gold and blue groups that would be engaged in that live streaming at 3-5. So.
Yes. So thank you for that clarification, because I did misspeak. So the 3-5 distance learning their distance learning experience will be similar, just with a different teacher.
Thank you. Mr. Barrett, I'm going to come your way. It appears that the hybrid learning option for my K through second grader will result in less interaction and fewer instruction hours than the distance learning option. Is this true?
It could. That could happen. I think what we're trying to do is give as much engagement as we can. And because we're going to redeploy staff in the distance learning, those kids would have a little more attention in distance learning, because it would be 5 days a week at home. I think that will be, difficult, but I think that's the case. And in grades 3 through 5, the hybrid teachers will be streaming so that kids will get more time than just the days in school. But I think in K1, 2, that could happen. The distance learning students could get more time with a teacher.
I think I would add that it just maybe looks a little bit different because, in the distance learning model, certainly they will have, the 5 days a week of teacher contact time that will still certainly, include the catch and release I had talked about earlier. But in the hybrid model, having in-person instruction and small group contact and individual conferring is different. And so, teachers will be working really hard on those at-home days to make sure students are engaged in some of those practice activities that sometimes might be worked into a station rotation in the classroom, so that when they're in the classroom, they can really be intently engaged with those students personally. So I think it's, on paper, the numbers look off, but it's just, it's different, and whatever you prefer for your learner. Next question. Sue, I'm going to come your way with this. What is the protocol for wellness check for students prior to getting even on the bus? Many employers require documented wellness checks of its employees. Where do we stand with this practice?
So we are requesting every family does do a wellness check prior to any student coming into the school building or getting on the school bus. At this time, we're not requiring documentation to be submitted to us daily. We'll be monitoring students all throughout the school day for any symptoms that we might need to be aware of, to isolate the student, to check them for their temperature and for any of the symptoms, and then to contact the parent if they need to come pick them up. But at this time, there's no documentation we're asking parents to submit to us prior to them coming to school.
Thank you. The next question is related to why we're waiting to go to hybrid when we were prepared to go that route in August.
So one of the things that gave us a lot of pause about hybrid as we began to think about things was the lack of engagement. What we worried about is hybrid would be about 50% engagement time with a teacher. When you look at 3 days, 1 week, and alternating weeks, 3 days, and then a 2-day week, you average the 40 and the 60%, you get 50% time. There would have been a lot of packets, a lot of worksheets, maybe some real in-depth reading and writing workshop that we do. That approach is our teachers are excellent at it. And so there would have been some real revision and real writing, but it would have been a struggle to engage kids on those off days. And we didn't want those off days to be a blizzard bag type approach with lots of rote learning happening. And so we devised this idea of trying to stream, keep kids connected to a teacher as much as possible every day. And that's why we shifted to this model, because we think it's going to be more powerful over the span of the entire year, over a 4-quarter year and 180 days.
Okay, the next question is related to changing models, so we've addressed that. How many hours per week will students be in structured time in hybrid versus distance models?
Can I ask a follow-up? Is the structured time referring to like connection with the teacher or versus independent, or can we get a follow-up to that?
Yeah, so I think what we'll do is we'll write down this parent's name, and we'll try and reach out and get some more information. So I have that.
Okay. Thank you. Perfect.
Okay. Will siblings have the same hybrid schedule? And the answer to that is yes. We are committed to keeping families and households on the same hybrid schedule. With so many other schools going full-time, why are we not at least going 3 days a week? Mr. Barrett, do you want to address this
So,
one?
yeah, I'm not aware in Franklin County of schools going full time. I think schools are either remote or hybrid. There are some schools in some smaller counties where they can do social distancing. High schools, I know a couple high schools with 400 kids where kids are in full time and they're struggling to do social distancing, but they're managing. But I don't know, and maybe the questioner knows some schools that are going full time, but in our area, in Franklin County, I don't know any schools doing that. I know in Granville, in Licking County, they're going full time and they are doing streaming for distance learning kids, but that's the only school district that I'm aware of nearby that's going full time. And that's a very small school district.
Will the kids' hours be the same for school as they were before COVID if they're on the hybrid option, and will busing be available? So the answer to both of those questions is yes. We will operate within the regular school day, and we will have busing available. And we also will be sharing busing information toward the end of September with families so that you have that information. Will students that choose to opt out of hybrid and continue with full distance learning be able to be involved in theater, auditions, and productions? Mr. Barrett?
Yeah, the answer is yes. They won't be able to be in person in the classroom, which is where much of the richness of that program happens. But they will be able to, go to try out to be in the plays and be a part of it that way. We want students on distance to have the full array of our extracurricular programs. So yes, I think it'll be more difficult to break in if you're not in person, but we just want to be really honest. We think distance learning is an option that many families are going to choose, even though they feel a pull to hybrid because they just want to remain safe. They have different things going on within their families that need, or they need to make that choice. But I want to be honest, I don't think that'll be as rich an experience in theater. Mr. Wagner and Ms. Maciosi do a fabulous job, and every year the plays are spectacular. So you can be part of that, but you may not experience the full, depth and breadth of the program in distance.
Okay, the next question, what are the school hours? So not knowing specifically the level, preschool AM is 8:30 to 11:15, PM is 12:20 to 3:05. There may be some variation that would be communicated. Elementary 8 to 2:25, middle school 8:45 to 3:30, and high school 7:35 to 2:50.
So I want to come back to a question because I think so Columbus Academy is in full time, and I think what they're doing is they have students, and I think St. Matthew is also, they have kids in a large space, and I think they're either in study halls or they may be streaming. I think actually Columbus Academy is streaming to a large group while they're doing social distancing in the regular classroom. So that's one I forgot to talk about. So I do know a school in our area that's basically back full time, and it's Columbus Academy. I think St. Matthew is as well, but I'm not sure they're doing the streaming. I think kids are doing work apart from the regular classroom.
Is there an option to utilize a kid's spot who opts out from hybrid option and assign my kid to have 100% in-person learning?
Could you say that? Could you repeat that? I'm sorry.
Is there an option to utilize a kid's spot who opts out of the hybrid option and assign my kid to have 100% in-person learning?
I don't think we can make that an option because I think many people might want to choose that, and I don't know how to do that equitably. So I don't think we can do that.
Ms. Holloman, what will classrooms in high school look like?
The physical layout of the classroom?
It does not specify, so
Okay.
maybe, touch on both.
Yeah, so all of the classrooms are being set up so that social distancing is able to be maintained, which is going to be different than what our students are used to, because many of our classrooms and all of the levels either have tables or they have the desks in pods for collaboration, and that's what we've been working towards. But now we have to spread apart to make sure we maintain that 6 feet. But the classrooms are being set up and have been set up as we speak, to be able to help maintain that social distancing in terms of the physical space. Extra furniture is being removed from the classrooms in order to make space to spread out the desks for students. So that is going to be something that's going to be different for our students when they go into the buildings. In terms of the structure of the period, so they're still going to run on the traditional bell schedule, and students will engage and they'll be able to move about the building in the same way that they would. As Mr. Baird had mentioned earlier, it'll be with half the students in the building on a given day. And they'll be moved quickly through the hallways and things of that nature, so that we can maintain social distancing as much as possible. I hope that answers your question. And if not, we can definitely follow up.
The next question is, exactly how many students will be in each class? So we will be following the guidelines of social distancing at 6 feet. And that typically equates to about 50% capacity based on our classrooms. It will vary, of course. It will depend on how many students opt out into the distance learning model and how many remain in our classes. But it will probably range anywhere from 10 to 15 students, depending on class enrollment and size of the classroom.
Yeah, one of the things I want to point out about our situation is, all of our buildings are over capacity except for Chapel Field Elementary. Our high school, we have some extra classroom space, but it's still over capacity. And, as soon as the bell rings and kids are in the hallway. So we do have constraints in space in terms of bringing students back in a hybrid. We also have budgetary constraints that we also need to mention and be mindful of. I'm told that Columbus Academy, it has students in, but I'm told that they went from 47 or from 28 elementary teachers to 47. So I don't know if that number is exact, but that's what I'm being told. So they basically, added a whole bunch of teachers and a whole bunch of expense, and our budget did not build that in to hire teachers. In addition to the fact, the only level of teachers that are really available in the Central Ohio market right now are K-3 teachers. It's really hard to find teachers above that level. So to staff distance learning, even in a third-party provider platform where one of our teachers would basically be managing, 25, 30 students, would have been difficult to find the teachers, first of all, and our budget couldn't sustain it.
So the next question kind of connects a little bit to something that you were just speaking of, Mr. Barrett. We know you've said you'll do your best to provide GJPS teachers for all students, no guarantee. How likely is a third-party vendor would be used to teach my elementary distance learning students?
We're hoping that that'll be unlikely. We don't want to do that. We don't think that's good for any level. And it's, the programs have improved, and it may be okay to take one math class. I know, my daughter's just graduated from college, but she did a couple online classes. She did okay. She didn't love them, but it's a way to get credits that you need at that level. But at the elementary level, I think kids need, one-on-one, teacher face-to-face interaction. And truthfully, I think K through 12 kids need that. And they're getting a rich depth and breadth of distance learning right now. But it's really, really difficult to do in a third party provider.
The next couple questions are related to the ability to revisit the learning model choice, which I have addressed, and that the fact that we'll work with families through that. The question is, the next question is this what a live stream will look like? Something like this meeting? Tia, do you want to touch on that?
Yeah, no. So the difference with this is that you all are viewing and just submitting through the chat, and there are opportunities for kids to submit through the chat, but students will actually log into the Google Meet, be on the call in the same manner that they are right now with teachers. And so they will be able to actively participate with their teacher and their classmates as it is appropriate for the lesson that's happening at that time. So they will be able to talk and converse and ask questions and answer questions and participate in discussions and things of that nature right alongside their peers in the classroom.
Thank you. Mr. Barrett, this next one's coming your way. Why are there so many meetings for a tax levy, but only one for school?
Yeah, I think that's a fair comment. I think we've only had one meeting for discuss the information on our school levy that's on the ballot November 3rd. But we plan to have several others. So I think that's a fair comment. You know, this meeting is probably something that we should have done sooner. I think it gives us a perspective. We've heard many of these questions, and you know, we opened up with a number of questions we heard, but I think this that's a fair comment, that this meeting is very useful. I hope to you, but certainly to us as well. And so we're you know, we're willing to listen and do meetings like this. I usually have a Panera coffee twice a month, maybe starting some of those back up virtually and just trying to you know, engage more. This has been, you know, we're maybe a little bit late in doing this, and you know, I feel that, and I think it's a fair question. So thank you.
The next question, will distance learning students be grouped with other elementary school students? And the answer to that is yes, that is likely to happen. Depending on how the family selections turn out, you know, we will need to group students in like grade levels as we are adjusting staffing. You know, if I think back to some of the previous data we had selected, we had some schools, you know, that maybe had 20 or more students from one particular grade level, and others that maybe had 5 or 11, and so there will definitely need to be some grouping of students from schools across the district when we are creating those elementary distance learning classes.
So it's 8 o'clock. If it's okay with everybody, if we could go till 8:30 or so. We know on YouTube you may have other plans and won't be able to stay with us, but we'd like to get through as many questions as possible. So if you're willing to stay, we'll work through your questions. So let's keep going.
Okay, Tia, I'm going to come your way with this one. What does streaming in look like at each building? What technology will the district be utilizing to facilitate streaming? Will screen time be limited when kids are in the buildings?
Yeah. And so I think that, you know, we call it live streaming, I think, because that's the simplest way to describe it. But as I had mentioned with the previous question, it's not live streaming in the sense of what we're doing right now, because there will be active participation between the students that are logging into Google Meet from home and the students that are in the classroom. And again, so the technology is the main platform for the online connection is through Google Meet, which is what we've been using up to this point. We wanted to make sure that we didn't change any of our platforms that students and families have become comfortable with now that we've been using it for as long as we have. We, in terms of the equipment, like I said, we've got laptops, Chromebooks, desktops, webcams, and all of those things the tech department is setting up in each classroom classroom connected to the smart board and the technology that we have there, so that projection and things like that is easier for the teachers and for the students to be able to see. But definitely making sure that we maintain that balance of screen time for all parties involved, so including the students that are in the building, and making sure that there are opportunities for everybody to kind of go off and do some independent or small group work that would kind of pull them away from the computer, and still have that interpersonal connection with the learning. It'll just be based on the lesson, the intended learning objectives, and the activities that are assigned for that particular day. So it will vary throughout the days, but across the week, there will definitely be a balance between the two.
Thank you. How likely are we to retain our current teachers if we choose hybrid? So, I think honestly, this is hard for us to predict the likelihood. It will all be dependent on the survey data that comes back and the number of students that choose distance learning and how we need to shuffle the teachers. I think I had shared earlier that, it weighs on our hearts and minds also, having to make those adjustments. And so we are really going to work as hard as we possibly can to limit those disruptions and those transitions when possible.
It's like I said before, it's the biggest flaw in our plan, and it's awful. And we're sorry that we may have to do it in some cases.
What is the timeline and criteria necessary to get back to school 5 days a week? We already have approval from the governor. Mr. Barrett?
Yeah, I'm not sure we have, I'll have to check that. I don't want to deny it, but I'm not sure that we have approval from the governor to go back. I guess you could say in a sense we have the approval to go back 5 days, but we're also under the jurisdiction of Franklin County Public Health. And I can tell you that what we have is people in our community all over the map. Some think we're, waiting too long to go back October 13th. Some think we should be all in with all kids right now. And I can tell you, nobody in Franklin County is doing that. I don't know of anybody that's even considering that. And I know of some places where that is happening, where spread is occurring. And so what we want to do is be mindful and measured in our approach, and think of not just all of our students and but our teachers and our support staff and our families that have people in their homes with underlying conditions. So I don't know too many school districts in our area. I know Licking, in Licking County, I know Granville's in. I know Columbus Academy has separated kids, and they hired, about 17 new teachers, something like that, 15 new teachers. At the end of the day, we do not feel like we have the authority to go back, given the recommendation from Franklin County Public Health, 5 days.
What are the safety precautions for busing? So with regard to busing, we are going to be limiting the number of students that are on the bus. Current guidance allows for 2 students per seat. However, we believe that we'll be able to maintain 1 student per seat. Siblings will likely need to sit together. Buses will have seating charts to help with contact tracing should that be needed. We also will be requiring students K through 12 to be wearing masks on the buses, and it's highly recommended for our preschool learners as well. We also have our bus drivers that will be wearing masks. We need to make sure that we are putting safety first. And so in some instances, we may need to work with bus drivers that, could potentially have their glasses fogging up. Those are things that we're, considering and working with them on. And then there will be also regular cleaning and disinfecting in between the routes and at the end of each day. So those are some of the things we have in place. Do you want to add anything, Mr. Barrett?
No, I think you covered it, and a big shout out to our transportation department and who have been helping with our technology needs and doing deliveries and working to in our buildings on a daily basis, pitching in to do whatever we need. And so, you know, they're going to be ready to enter into the hybrid very soon. And they're doing a great job for us now as well.
Where is the high school school supply list? Tia, do you want to address that one?
Yeah, so there isn't an official high school school supply list. Typically, the teachers share with students if there are specific things that they need for a course. But there isn't like an official list that's presented. It's typically your notebooks and your pencils and pens and things of that nature. But if a teacher needs something specific for a course, they tend to let students know that with their introductory letter.
Thank you. Can you explain what a streamed instruction day will be for elementary? So that would be 3-5 with the hybrid kids. Do you want to take that one also, Tia?
Yes, so it'll look very similar to what we have described for 6-12, where students will log on at different points in the day for some whole class instruction, some whole class activities, and possibly for some small group or individual. The teacher would schedule different times throughout the day for the students to log in, very similar to what they're doing now. It just might be coupled more with some asynchronous or independent work that they would be able to do to get them off of the computer when the students in the classroom are also doing some of that independent work as well. But it'll be very similar. There'll just be different times throughout the day where they will log in for those whole class experiences.
Thank you. How will tests be given for distance learning students versus classrooms kids?
Yeah, so we are still finalizing our research actually in different platforms for assessments. We're looking at a couple of things that allow for secure testing options. Basically what that means is that the teacher would be able to kind of lock down the computer while a student is taking a test, similar to the platforms that we use when we do state tests online. And so we hope to have a decision on that and get teachers trained before the end of the month for that one. But the other piece of it is that I know that because, as we had mentioned, this is a different experience. And so a lot of creative things are coming out of it, and teachers are finding innovative ways to gather assessment data in different ways, through observations, through written assignments, through discussions, through small group conversations or individual conversations, where they're kind of collecting some of that data that's not in your traditional paper pencil test. So we are exploring that, and I definitely commend the teachers for all of the things that they are trying in different ways that they're tackling this situation that we're in. But we're also looking for platforms that make some of that official testing capable in this setting.
I'm going to come back at you again, Ms. Holloman.
Yeah.
Specifically, how will at-home days for K2 hybrid be handled? More like Blizzard bags, or more like the current distance model as far as being on a computer, but without the live teaching?
Yeah, so I think, so the goal is that it is not like the Blizzard bags. We definitely want to make sure the experience is as rich as possible, as meaningful as possible, and connected to the learning that's happening in the classroom. There will be a blend of, as I had mentioned earlier, of experiences on some of our platforms that we purchased, like Lexia, which is a reading program, and Dreambox, which is a math program. And the students are using those systems now, so they're beginning to get comfortable with that. But also there will be opportunities for them to maybe explore the house, or maybe to interview family, or, like I said, to do some independent reading and writing experiences, and things that the teacher then will be able to follow up on when the kids return to the classroom. So we definitely are going to make sure that it is rich, but we also know that there's going to be an independent component. So we want it to be an extension of the learning that does stretch the students, but they are able to attend to, for the most part, on their own.
The next question, will aftercare be provided on school days? And the answer to that is yes. We are working with YWCA to get that aftercare up and running. Our business director, Scott Lofton, and I have been collaborating with them, and they will communicate specifically, parameters around their programming, but we will be working closely with them on the safety protocols. Sue will be following up with them specific to reporting of cases, and those that will be available for our families. Gehanna has done an amazing job so far. Right now in elementary school, my son is on with his teacher all day. Will this continue with distance learning? Ms. Holloman?
Yes. So yes, the distance learning schedule for those students in elementary that are 100% distance, it will be a very similar schedule to what they're operating under right now. And there will be multiple opportunities throughout the day where the student engages with the teacher. Again, there may be some variation depending on the activity and the learning objective, but they will have multiple opportunities to connect pretty much every day with their teacher.
Yeah, and I will add that the schedule itself will be expanded a little bit to mirror the in-school schedule that students are experiencing for distance learning, or that they're experiencing in hybrid. The next question is related to switching models. So we've addressed that one a couple times. In the original surveys, you shared that the overwhelmingly majority were in favor of in-person learning, but you decided on hybrid or virtual only. What were the actual numbers in that survey? So I believe I shared those numbers at a board meeting earlier. I don't have those in front of me right away, so I'll have to pull those up. And we can come back to that one if that's okay. Will temperatures be taken daily? Sue, do you want to address this one?
We are not going to be taking the temperatures of kindergarten through 12th grade students daily. We will be taking them for preschool. Preschool licensing rules are different than school age licensing rules. So we will take the temperatures of preschoolers for the AM and the PM session, but only for students in K through 12 if they are experiencing symptoms, not feeling well, or we suspect a temperature.
Thank you. Can you explain in detail the new hybrid plan? So Tia, maybe we can tag team this one. We will have students split into two groups. There will be a hybrid gold and a hybrid blue group. Students will come to school on 2 in-person days, and we'll have 2 at-home asynchronous independent learning days at the K2 level. At the 3-5 level, those at-home days would include live streaming into the classroom. And then in the 6-12 level, it would also include the live streaming piece. The Mondays, we talked a little earlier about the condensed schedule. So students on the hybrid schedule, each Monday, we will have a shortened class periods that will resume around midday. We'll share those times and more details about that coming up. But those days would be a combination of some teacher-directed synchronous time as well as some asynchronous independent learning activities. Tia, do you maybe want to touch on the instructional, models that we might see in the hybrid plan?
Yeah, so I think that, we are still going to be able to see things like the workshop model that Mr. Baird had mentioned earlier. There might be some station rotation. There definitely are going to be opportunities for whole class discussions, individual interactions with teachers. There's going to be some small group opportunities. It'll just be based off of what the lesson is for the day and the intended learning outcome. I think, again, with the exploring the idea of streaming and having students connect, it allows us to maintain the options that Mr. Baird had mentioned. for all of our students, and specifically our middle school and high school, the robust course catalog that we have to offer, we're still able to provide that for our students using this model. So, but it will definitely be a mix. And I think on any given day, you might see a little bit of a variation from a class or from a teacher just based on the learning activity at that particular time.
Thank you. So I'm going to circle back up to the question about what the actual numbers were in the survey related to a full return and the distance learning. There are several data points on this particular survey, but I'll just share that there were 2,073 responses that selected the traditional full return if guidelines allowed as their first choice. And then distance learning every day for all students, there was 1,862 responses that chose that model as their last choice, their sixth choice. So if you remember on that survey, there were multiple models. And so, you know, those votes were kind of distributed across those options. But we do have all that data shared at one of our board meetings earlier in the summer. I'd have to look back and see which one they were shared in. The next question says that once the surveys are completed, will they separate the students and let them be with their year-long teachers as soon as possible, or wait until October 13th? So we will be communicating with families about those teacher changes. We will be working on transition plans and opportunities to get to know new teachers, but we wouldn't make that shift until October 13th. The next question related to switching models. So we've addressed that one. How many times will we switch back and forth between hybrid and full distance before the decision is made to stay full distance learning, which does not promote stability or inconsistency for my student?
Well, we're hoping we don't have to go back full distance. What we're trying to build is a plan that allows us for flexibility so that in small ways, we may go distance like a classroom or maybe a school. That would be unfortunate. But what we hope to be able to finish the year in a hybrid model with the ability to transition to distance if there's quarantining that needs to take place, so that kids don't miss 14 days of learning because we don't have a teacher for their class. And so it's really important for us, and I've said this a couple times, to look at the full year, 180 days. This is really a marathon. It's not a sprint, so that we can be nimble and respond when things happen, because things will pop up. They have popped up, and in terms of cases that have taken place. But at the end of the day, we want to have a plan that allows us to be nimble and adjust whatever disruptions that could occur, whatever disruptions that might happen.
The next question is connected to the AB schedule and the block scheduling. So we've addressed that one, saying we are continuing to look at that. The next one, how true is it that the CDC is advising parents to prepare for a school sleepover in case a disaster, which could include COVID?
I am not aware of anything like that. I read quite a bit on what's happening with the CDC, and I haven't heard that. We'll check into that, but that's not something we're aware of. Are you guys aware? Anybody? No. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't heard that.
With pre-selected questions mean that you are not looking at the ones we asked tonight. So I think maybe that question may have come in before we started going through the list. Our intent of starting with those pre-selected questions was that those were the most common ones we had been receiving. And so we knew that those were on the tops of a lot of people's minds. But certainly, we're working to get through these, as fast as we can. Can you please speak more about what the pre-K2 independent learning days will look like? Let's tag team that again, Tia. So if I were to start out, it could be a variety of activities. They would be asynchronous, so not teacher directed. However, the teachers will be very thoughtful in planning those engagement activities for students while they're at home. So it could include some reading time. Certainly it could include some writing time. It might include online platform work with one of our, our reading or math program, Lexi or Dreambox. It could include some game time, some manipulation with math manipulatives maybe that have been sent home. Could be some, some speaking and language activities, just a wide variety of things that will supplement what has been addressed and what they've been working on in the classroom that they can be practicing at home. I'm thinking also connected to foundations, practice with the letter sounds and their writing. Those are just some ideas about what might occur.
Yeah, and you mentioned it. I just wanted to reiterate that it'll be an extension of what they're doing in the classroom. So it will be that extra practice based off of the learning that's happening in the classroom, and the teachers absolutely will be very thoughtful in what they send home with the students, because they want it to be meaningful and they want it to continue that learning and to be that opportunity of practice for them. It might also include some additional art like projects or things like that. It might bring in some science and social studies components of things that they can do using materials around the house. But again, it expands on the learning that's happening in the classroom, and then it will be revisited when the students return in the following day.
Thank you. So the next one, you're expecting teachers to simultaneously teach in-person and distance students. So, I think, the short answer is yes, there will be, that will be going on. However, we'll be working with teachers to support the planning process involved. We'll be working with teachers to support, appropriate activities related to the lesson objectives for the day. So what's happening when they're in person versus what's happening while they're at home. I think ultimately, one of the benefits of this model is the ability for the continuity of instruction and curriculum work. But there will be, teachers will be working with kids at home and in the classroom.
Yeah, and so just to, again, piggyback on that, we definitely will be working with teachers to help support with that planning and just thinking through what are going to be those structures that we have used in different instances, but that might look slightly different to be able to support working with those two different groups. So it may be, like I said, a station rotation that allows the teacher to be able to focus on smaller groups, and one of those small groups might be the students that are all at home, while the students that are in the classroom are working on in a different station rotation. It might be different sets of pairing and just the way that we use Google Meet in creative ways. So there's definitely a lot of ideas and opportunities to explore, but we know that we need time to be able to really prepare and plan for what that's going to look like.
The next question, what happened to all the hybrid planning that took place before school started? It seems you are starting from square one again. So I'll say, actually, we are incorporating a lot of the planning that took place before school. We have hybrid learning documents that were created with a lot of input from teachers on a task force and staff members. There's definitely a new component to it with the live streaming piece. But our documents that we had created and our guidance that we had put forth prior to the start of school have been our foundation, and we've just been making adjustments and adding to it. Switching back and forth sounds like a horrible idea. It seems so disruptive to the students and the teachers. Not specifically a question, but do you want to address that, Mr. Barrett?
Yeah, I think it is horrible. We don't want to switch back and forth, but what we want to do is stay in hybrid once we get there as long as possible, but have the ability, if we need to switch a classroom because of a quarantine situation, or maybe one or two that we could do that, especially if a teacher, let's say, is quarantining but feels well and maybe we're exposed to COVID but can still teach. We've talked with our teachers union about that, and we want to, and I think there's agreement that we want to kind of engage people as long as we can, because we all want to keep learning going. So it's not our objective to switch. We want to be ready in case we have to switch, and we just don't know what's going to happen with the flu season, which generally lasts from the beginning of December till mid to the end of February. And so that is going to be a very, very telling time. I've heard that it may not be an issue because the flu in the southern hemisphere, as I said before, it's winter there, people are inside. It's not an issue there. Hopefully that'll happen here, and we'll be able to get through the year in hybrid. And maybe if there's a vaccine, we'll be able to do more than that. But right now, that's what the outlook kind of looks like.
Why is it okay that these young kids have to switch their teachers? I have a child on an IEP and he has bonded with his teacher, and now it will change. Yeah, Aaron, it's not something that we are feeling good about. And, we really, really want to work hard to limit those changes as much as possible. We know it will be tough. We know it will be challenging. And we know it's one of the shortcomings of our plan. So, we certainly want to work with families and help with the transition as much as possible. In the event that it would be helpful for a student to maybe have a connection with the teacher beforehand. I mean, we want to be creative in ways that we can help with this transition, but it's really difficult. It's really difficult. The next question is related to the switching of models. So we have addressed that. Mr. Barrett, this next one, since this has affected parents greatly, why wasn't a survey sent to those that chose hybrid about what they wanted in a hybrid program?
In terms of, I think, we could have done that in terms of like how many days per week, or in terms of what the instruction would look like. I think we took a lot of what we learned about hybrid and from a task force we did earlier in the summer. I think there was something like 90 teachers and administrators as part of that. At the end of the day, a lot of what that went into the hybrid thinking, even this plan, was derived from that work, but we could have done that. We didn't, but that's something we could have done.
Will there be an aide in the classroom helping the teacher with their interactions with students who are watching via streaming, and noticing if a child has questions? It will not be standard for an aide to be in all of our classrooms. There may be some classrooms where that is the case, depending on programming and services provided in that environment. So we are, in our professional development, we'll be working with teachers on monitoring strategies and ways to utilize student leadership roles, as well as, chat features and things like that. But we do not have staffing to have an aide in every classroom. Last spring, I thought the online was not worth it. So far, it has been improved this semester. If we continue to stay online and not choose hybrid, will the learning be like it is now? Mr. Barrett, do you want to address that one?
Just to be candid, it may not be as rich. And the point I made earlier about having, being really self-regulated, self-motivated to do work in an independent way will be helpful on that model. I think right now our teachers are, as I said in a video I made Friday, hitting it out of the park with distance learning. They're completely focused on it. They have learned a lot. They're using platform forms that they just learned about, and they're, creating engagement that's much different from the spring. We couldn't be more proud of that work. But there will be, limits to what they're able to do in hybrid and distance as they stream. So I would say that it's not going to look exactly the same as it does now, and it may not be as engaging because teachers may not be able to engage as as intensely as they are now.
What do you expect the average class size for distance learning option to be, specifically elementary ages? So in this particular question, it will all be dependent on the data, but we would be shooting to kind of keep those class sizes around the typical class size that we would see in the district. So, roughly 25 students, give or take, depending on how that data plays out.
I just want to point out that in the spring, when we did the survey, I remember there being 700 or so elementary students whose parents requested distance learning. If we had hired new teachers at 25 students per class, that would have required us to hire 28 more teachers, which just isn't in our budget. So this model, we're going to redeploy some staff to teach at the K1-2 level, and we hope that it's around 25 students a class.
So we have reached 8:30. I'm going to send the last two questions Sue's way, and then we'll kind of wrap up with some closing information. So Sue, there's a question related to how testing will be looking for students with 504s that need extra time, and then the hybrid option for ESS classes. So extended time for 504 and testing, and then hybrid option for ESS classes.
So we will make sure that the 504 accommodations for extended time is provided for students who need that. If it's in the school building, we hope to get it done within the same school day, although it could carry over into a future date if it's not able to be accommodated within the same school day. For those students who are at home, we'll be able to provide, in many opportunities, a time to do that beyond the class period in a separate setting and make a plan with the student to submit their work. Or we could do it with them the next day if they're within the school building. For our students under the distance learning model, they'll also be provided their accommodations under their 504 plan, and they'll work that out specifically with the distance learning teacher that they have. If it's K-5 or if it's 6 through 12, it will be worked out with their teacher of record under their distance learning time. We try really hard not to extend within the lunch period or after school or before school for those students, and get that extended time within their school day. The second question was about extended support services. We have two different levels of services. We have extended learning support services for kindergarten through 5th grade, and extended support services for students in 6th through 12th grade. And for the majority of those students, although not all, we'll be looking at an AM/PM session for them. And so we'll be looking at some students attending for the morning 4 days a week, and some students attending for the afternoon 4 days a week, and the teachers providing at-home learning activities for the other half of the day and for the learning periods on Monday. We know each family is a little bit different though, and so some conversations have already been happening for those students with our most significant disabilities for home instruction if they're unable to come into the school building at all, or to participate in distance learning.
Thank you, Sue. Okay, so we are going to wrap things up. There are obviously many, many questions in the chat that we were not able to get to. And so I see a couple questions related to, will we provide information that we weren't able to address this evening? And so the answer to that is yes, we are going to, we have all the questions copied from the chat. Any question that we were not already able to answer, We will work on getting an FAQ together that we'll send out on Saturday. We'll make sure you have some time to review it before the survey closes on Sunday at midnight. And then certainly the recording of this will be posted on our website for anyone that wants to go back and take a or re-listen to some of the answers that we previously gave. So I'm going to pass it back over to Mr. Barrett for some closing remarks. I certainly want to thank Tia and Sue for joining us this evening to help answer some of these questions as well.
I want to thank Tia Holloman, our curriculum director, Sue Wigging, our executive director of special education, and our assistant superintendent, Jill Elliott. Thank you so much for being here to answer questions tonight. I want to thank everybody who joined us on the YouTube chat. Your questions were enlightening to us. When we have discussions like this, we learn as much as you do. And so it's good to hear what's on your minds. So thanks so much for joining us tonight. I think just, I hope you can keep in mind that we want to be prepared for a year that's going to be uncertain, that's going to be ambiguous and unpredictable. And we want to be able to have the ability to keep learning going no matter what happens. And it's taking us a little time to do that. In a sense, we're going slow to go fast later. But I think the engagement our teachers are providing in distance learning right now is unbelievable. And I'm really proud of that work and the engagement that's happening. They're not just building, on knowledge from day to day, but they're collaborating. They're not just lecturing kids, they're creating collaborative environments where kids are learning from one another. And we're so proud of that engagement. So thanks, a big shout out to all our teachers, and thanks all of you for joining us tonight. The questions that we were not able to answer here, we'll put in an FAQ and get it to you on Saturday. The survey is not due. You don't have to fill it out until the midnight Sunday night. So we hope this was helpful. Thanks so much for joining us. Have a good night.
Thank you. Have a good evening.